Good afternoon, our viewers at home. You're welcome again to another interesting episode of Insights from Eximeters Legal. I'm your host, Esther, and today we'll be discussing another crucial aspect of commercial law, which majorly also looks into commercial transactions under company law, which we term due diligence in commercial transactions. What is due diligence? Why are due diligence necessary? What does legal due diligence entail? We are going to look into these issues in this discourse today. So please ride on with me and let's enlighten ourselves. So due diligence is the level of care or judgment exercised prior to establishing a commercial relationship. Most of the time when investors want to go into investments, when they want to invest in a particular entity, a company, when we say entity now, a separate legal juristic person, an entity, an organization, they want to put in stocks, they want to buy into the stocks, they want to invest their monies into businesses. They do proper due diligence to ensure that what they're putting their money into is actually worth it. And this is really what due diligence entails. So as the name, says, due diligence. So diligently ensuring and maintaining the proper due of level of care and exercising the right judgment before you enter into a commercial relationship or a commercial transaction. So investors will definitely do their homework before plunging into any investment. We see that even in our contemporary world, there are a lot of mergers and acquisitions that goes on. When we say mergers and acquisition now, it's certain terms in company law where two different companies, two different organizations merge, or there's a takeover, there's an acquisition, maybe because one is a bigger company, there's a smaller company, and there are different expertise that both companies could gain from each other by becoming one. So most of the time in mergers and acquisition, before companies marry each other in the legal parlance, before they come together as one to become an entity, most of the time each of the parties do their due diligence to ensure, okay, what are the debts, what are the liabilities, what are the assets, what are the obligations, that they're going to be acquiring, what are the assets they want to acquire, what are the liabilities of the companies they want to take over or they want to merge with. So these are the things, that are entailed in due diligence. And a couple of times we have different areas in which due diligence can be performed. So we have commercial due diligence, we have financial due diligence, we have legal due diligence, and we have IT due diligence. So these are major areas, that most companies look into. Yes, we have other aspects of due diligence. We have intellectual due diligence, we have tax due diligence, we have environmental due diligence, and all these are things that investors want to look into. So most of the time, they hire consultants, they hire practitioners, lawyers, accountants to look into the books. In recent times, we've seen Elon Musk's intention of wanting to buy Twitter over. But of course, after looking into certain things based on due diligence, I think recently his lawyers advised against it, that maybe there are certain documentations that have to be brought into. Of course, the case is still is not sub judice as it is, it's still on. So definitely we cannot really state categorically what the outcome of this case is until they come out of court. So we can't really discuss that. But we're just explaining that those kind of takeovers, those kind of mergers will entail due diligence. So let's go into what due diligence and what are legal due diligence. So our major focus, today we will be looking into legal due diligence, and we'll also be defining some aspects of other areas of due diligence. So legal due diligence is a process that involves the collecting, understanding, and assessing all legal risks associated with the target company. So when we say target company, that's majorly the company the investor wants to buy into or wants to take over or wants to merge with. So you want to assess what are the legal risks. Okay, you want to go into the Corporate Affairs Commission if it's Nigeria, for instance, which is like the company house, to see, okay, are they filing their books properly? What's their annual returns status like? You know, who are their directors? You want to look into all those things like, okay, is this a company you really want to partner with? Is this somewhere you want to put your money into? So that's just a simple definition of legal due diligence. But we're going to go into the whole process of what legal due diligence entails. But before we delve into legal due diligence as it is, we're going to look into some definitions, you know, of other areas of due diligence. So when we say IT due diligence, what does it mean? IT due diligence is just an audit of a company's information technology infrastructure and processes, you know, frequently with a focus on assessing the security of that company. So this type of due diligence will allow the acquiring company to evaluate existing information technology structures and identify any potential security risks. So this is very, very important. If you know, in any takeover, in any merger, you know, IT diligence is something that has to be done, you know, by any investor. So the investors, the advisors, consultants of an investor of a company that wants to acquire a target company or take over or merge with, have to advise in this direction that there are different aspects of the due diligence that has to be undertaken to ensure that you look into the state of health of the business that the company wants to take over. So there's also financial due diligence. So one of the most important types of due diligence is the financial due diligence that seeks to check whether the financials, you know, shows accuracy or not. You want to look into it that, okay, do they provide a thorough understanding of all the company's financials, including the audited financial statements? What's the statement of affairs? Majorly, they look into a couple of times in the last 3 years, the last 5 years. What are the unaudited financial statements? You want to look into the management accounts. You want to look into the tax, you know, the financial projections, the tax projections of the company, and look at different schedules, the asset register, things like that. So all these issues are also dealt with in financial due diligence. We have administrative due diligence. You want to look into what's the administrative related items in the company. What does it entail? You want to look into the state of health of the administration in that company, the operational costs, things like that. What's the cost of running? Just basically ensuring that, okay, you are doing an overhaul of properly investigating what's going on in the company you want to buy into or take over or merge with. There's also asset due diligence. There is human resources due diligence. So you want to look at, okay, what's the total employee? Who are there ghost workers, which means are there workers that are on the payroll and don't report to work, or are there contract workers, or they're fixed term workers, or permanent work? You just want to look at all these things, you know, as a whole in human resource due diligence. So in a lot of commercial transactions, so things like asset due diligence, administrative due diligence are prevalent. So all those ones come a lot of times under the commercial due diligence. You want to look at the taxes as well, you know, in terms of, okay, what's the reporting format? Are they under reporting or are they over reporting the tax? You want to look into all that. What are the documentations for tax compliances? You want to look into that so that you know what liabilities you are acquiring, you know, when taking over the company or merging with the company. What are you going into? So it's just like any relationship. You want to do a due diligence even on the individual, you know, before you even go into a relationship with the person, whether it's a platonic relationship or otherwise. So it's the same also when it comes to company. And under the law actually gives you the right as an investor to do your proper due diligence, and it gives different platforms for the due diligence to be undertaken. There's also environmental due diligence. You want to look at all their environmental permits, their licenses. Have they really been complying, especially when it comes to a manufacturing outfit? If it's a manufacturing company, for instance, there are certain licenses and permits, you know, that has to be acquired, you know, and obtained rather by the company. So you want to see, okay, are they up to date in the licensing? Are licenses expired and they are not being renewed? Are there licenses that have been revoked? You want to look into all those things. So there's a lot that due diligence entails, and you also want to look into the validation or the correspondences with the regulatory authorities and stuff like that. So these are very, very key issues to look into. So when we say legal due diligence, like we said, it has to do with collection of data, conducting, a proper review, investigation, and on all the legal issues within the company, on all the corporate matters. How many cases do they even have in court? These are part of the legal diligence you have to do. So there are a lot of issues. So legal due diligence, so it's necessarily conducted in the commercial transactions to look at, or especially when you are investing or you are purchasing, taking over the company. So it can be done by proper review, investigation, and carrying out searches, on the places, on the documents. You have to interview the employees. You ensure that all the liabilities related to the subject matter, which is the company or the target company, are discovered before completion of the transaction, so that to know whether the investment you are going into is going to be beneficial. Is it worth it? Have you done the cost-benefit analysis, as it were? So these are the things that legal due diligence entails. You are assessing majorly all the legal risks. So in corporate matters, in commercial transactions, the process of investigating companies in advance, things like sole proprietorship, joint ownership, mergers and acquisitions, takeovers, gives you the opportunity with due diligence to gain a proper understanding of the company. So a lot of obligations, so that you have to investigate the debts, the liabilities, the cases that the companies have. When we say cases now, the suits, are there lawsuits against the company? Are there arbitrations in process, with the company? What are the assets of the company? You investigate the tax returns, you investigate the liabilities of the company, you investigate any pending lawsuits, like we explained earlier, and also the potential lawsuits against the company. So when we say potential lawsuits, you want to look into, okay, now, take for instance, an organization that have a couple of employees, and this happens a lot in practice, when certain employees are aggrieved, and maybe some people have been laid off. You want to go into human resources, even under the legal due diligence, and ask questions. Okay, how many employees have been laid off, maybe let's say in the last 1 year? So look into the track record. How many have brought a lawsuit against the company? Maybe on the basis of unfair dismissal, or have their remunerations been properly paid, or have they been properly compensated? So you have to look into all those things, because if not, you might eventually be acquiring a potential lawsuit, when taking over the company. So you also have to look into the corporate legal status of the target company, look into the company house, the documentation that the company has filed by the company. Who are the directors of the company? Who are the shareholders? Who are the current shareholders? Who are the current directors, the non-executive directors, the executive directors? Who are the promoters of the company? Have they filed? Do they file properly? And do they regularly submit annual returns, to the company house? These are things that you have to fully assess. So it's a proper assessment. Also, the legal due diligence is a proper assessment, even of the financials, the legal risk as it relates to the assets, the corporate status, intellectual property, contracts, land transactions, the issues of, when we say intellectual property too, the issue of copyright, the patents, the trademarks. You have to do a proper due diligence on all these issues, especially when you are acquiring or taking over or merging, with a company as an investor. So what are the benefits of conducting legal due diligence? It's important for investors, to be able to conduct proper due diligence, especially on the legal side, before they take a decision on whether they want to invest or put in the monies. And that is why it's always good, for investors. It's not just enough for you to just have the money and say, yes, I have these billions of dollars I want to put in. You have to have the proper consultants, the proper advisors, commercial advisors, comprising of lawyers and accountants, tax practitioners, even IT professionals, to be able to make sure that they give you an awesome state of the company you want to buy into. And I think that's probably what is apparently helping Elon Musk now, because he's putting in the proper advisors, who are able to tell him, okay, if these documents are not released, then maybe we should not go into this. So you have to be able to ask questions, as it were. So investors need to conduct the legal due diligence, before involving in any merger, in any acquisition or takeovers or other transactions with any company. So what are the benefits of conducting legal due diligence? These are non-exhaustive actually, but we're going to list a couple of them. One, it can help the investor to be able to assess the risk, providing solutions to minimize the risk, and also reducing the potential loss to the investor, the creditors, and the shareholders. So it's very, very important. This is one advantage of being able to conduct a legal due diligence. Also, due diligence will help in preventing the investor from incurring liabilities and checking the prospect of solvency. When we say solvency, under the law, a company can be declared insolvent when it's not able to act as a going concern, it's not able to meet its obligation, the liabilities are more than the assets. At some point, like an individual going to court to file for bankruptcy, a company can also, file to be insolvent, and that makes the company no longer a going concern. So you want to, as part of legal due diligence, it gives the investor the opportunity to be able to look into, okay, is this company still going to be a going concern, or is this still currently a going concern, or is it just a sham, or it's just a shell. A lot of people have bought into companies that are just a shell, and at the end of the day, they are biting their fingers, and the monies, have gone down the drain. So also, part of the advantage of conducting legal due diligence, it's aid in monitoring the target company, the financial position, the corporate status, the leases, the warranties, compensations, let's say tax liabilities, all the long-term agreements as they were, and also ascertain the debts of the company. Another advantage is it's beneficial in ensuring that corporate legal documentations are properly done, in implementing the structure of especially for a complex commercial transaction. So the due diligence is actually, in practice, the legal practice, due diligence is actually a massive work, especially when it comes to mergers and acquisitions, because I have seen that in practice, and I've seen, that you have to be able to, you go into the offices of the target company. You are not just sitting down in your office and getting all the books. You have to go into, you ask questions. It's like you're on an investigation, like a CIA. So it's something that it's a lot of work, but it's worth it, if done properly. So another advantage of legal due diligence is it enables both the investors and the target company's lawyers to render accurate legal opinions for the merger or acquisition transaction. So it's like an audit, like in accounting, we have auditors, and they tell you, okay, they've assessed the financial statements, and it represents a true and fair view, of the state of the affairs of the company. So that's when they have done the audit of the financial statements. And it's also the same when it comes to legal due diligence. You are doing an audit, albeit of the legal state of the company that entails even the financials, and you want to be able to give a proper opinion. So there's a benefit in that the lawyer of the investor and the lawyer of the target company, both of them are able to come up with the proper legal opinion on the state of the company, on the state of health on the company. It also prevents corruption and illegal transactions, especially, and it helps, when any company knows that, okay, it has the potential to grow. Every company wants to grow. Nobody wants to remain at the level in which they started. And that is why a lot of companies, even though they'll start small, but they want to bring in investors. And when they know that at some point, they want to bring in investors, the risk of a corruption and illegal transactions which is actually minimized, because you don't want a situation when due diligence is being done and a lot is being found. Then it collapses the commercial transactions, it collapses the deal. And at the end of the day, the target company gets to lose. So due diligence is beneficial in the sense that it prevents corruption. It also prevents illegal transactions. So what are the steps of corporate due diligence, especially when in the legal balance? So legal due diligence or corporate due diligence, the steps, there are steps to it, and we're going to mention some of the steps to it. You have to review the documents of the target company. So there are a couple of documents to review. You review the memorandum of association of the company, of the target company. You review the article of association of the target company. You review the financials. You review the asset register. You review the leases, the land documentation, the certificate of occupancy. You want to do searches. Okay, if they have a certificate of occupancy, you want to do searches at the land registry of the place where the lands are situated. Okay, have they been properly gotten? Do they really have governor's consent on it? And so many issues like that. So there are different documents that has to be looked in. So you have to be a doctor to assess and diagnose, as it were, those documents. Like, okay, yes, okay, is this document okay? Is it right? Is it not right? So you want to look into all those issues. Also, another step, you have to carry out interviews of individuals that has a proper knowledge of the company. You might have to interview the employees. You might have to interview some of the customers, some of the vendors, some of the suppliers of the company. You carry out necessary searches at the appropriate places. So with regulatory authorities, you want to carry out searches. At land registry, you want to carry out searches. At the corporate house, the company house, for instance, in Nigeria, the Corporate Affairs Commission, you want to carry out searches, to ensure that, okay, what is the status, the current state of the company when it comes to regulations, abiding with proper legislations according to the Companies Act. So you want to also do the direct visitation. And also, you want to look at what's the valuation of the company. Most of the time, especially when companies want to either merge or they want to be bought over, there's always a property valuation most of the time that is being done, especially if the company has a building of its own. So you want to assess all those things. You want to also do your own property valuation. Also, your lawyers or your other consultants wants to do a direct visit, to the company as well, to be able to see, okay, what is actually going on in terms of operations. You want to scrutinize the public records of the target company. You want to also conduct media and internet search on the target company. Even IT due diligence also comes in here, under the legal, really, because you want to look at, okay, what are the infrastructure, as it were, and do they comply, with the legal regulations. You want to evaluate all the ongoing suits. When we say suits now, we say cases against the company, or whether there are potentials for suits against the company. So these are some of the things that has to be looked into. So legal due diligence is always very necessary and advisable before any commercial transaction or corporate transaction is done with any third party. So the rationale behind investigating and carrying out this corporate due diligence will relate to, like we said, all those issues of buyovers, takeovers, mergers and acquisitions, to ensure that you are guiding against, at least to the barest minimum, any future legal risks or problems that could arise, from that transaction. So it's very necessary, that, as we said, that you look into all these issues that could be an obstacle before you go into buying into an entity. So due diligence is very, very important, and it's something that it's advisable, for any investor. Even under the law, it's allowed. Definitely under company law, under commercial transactions, you have to do your homework. So it's like doing your homework, investigating properly, collecting the right data, looking into the documentations to be sure that, okay, everything is all well done and dusted, at least to a large extent. You want to look into the board minutes of meetings, the board meetings. So what are the issues that have been said? You want to tell the company secretary of the company, they'll give you the company's records, the minutes of the company maybe in the last 5 years. So a lot of things will come out when you read those minutes of the meetings. You know what has been discussed. You know what are the potential dangers that the company is facing. Because in meetings, the minutes is a public record anyway. It's supposed to be also filed at the Corporate Affairs Commission. And you also want to look into all these minutes, at least maybe in the last 3 or 4 years. You want to look into all this. What are the guarantees also that the company has given? What are the material contracts they've entered into? Are there any joint venture agreements they've entered into? Are there any share purchase agreements they've entered into with other third parties? You want to look into all these issues. You want to look at the facilities they've taken with the bank, all the loan agreements, all the bank financing agreements. Are there letters of credit, that have not been closed? Are there open LCs? When we say open LCs now, like open letters of credit. You want to look at all these issues, especially if it's maybe a company that deals with import and exportation. So you want to look at all these issues, to ensure that you are not buying into a dead company or a company that's almost going into comatose. Also, you also want to talk to the customers of the company. So it's also part of customer due diligence as well. What are their experiences, with this target company, and what are the things that could be done. Even in the process of due diligence, the investor also gets to know what are the areas that can be improved, when they put in money into the business. So these things also, this kind of due diligence helps and gives room for all these opportunities. So acquirers are always very careful. Investors are always very careful, and they exercise the due diligence to evaluate how well that target company will fit into their overall strategic business plan, of the investor. Because any investor has to also do their necessary feasibility study, have to have the strategic plan, and like, okay, yes, after doing this due diligence, this company I want to buy into, this company I want to invest in, this company I want to merge with or take over, is it going to fit into the business plan? Also in terms of technology, in terms of the products, in terms of the market access. So these are important issues when we talk about due diligence. So majorly today we've been able to discuss the essence of due diligence, why it is important for investors, especially in commercial transactions and under the company law, what legal due diligence entails, and what are the advantages, of due diligence, which is very, very key and important for companies to be able to conduct, investors to be able to conduct, and companies also be able to allow, investors access to this information. They have to disclose, these records. You go, especially even in Nigeria, you go into the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Nigerian Stock Exchange. You want to look at, especially if it's a listed or quoted company, you also want to look at or what's the status of the company, especially when it comes to the relevant regulators. So today, we've looked into what due diligence is, what are the types and areas of due diligence. We've also delved into the aspects of legal due diligence and explained what it entails. What are the we've explained a bit, to a large extent also how it works in practice in terms of looking into the documentations. We've looked into the steps of due diligence, especially when it comes to legal due diligence. And it's just an advice for anybody considering investments. Don't just put in your money. Check well, look well, get the proper consultant to conduct the proper search, diligently investigating. That's what due diligence entails. All the necessary things that could be a snag, in the commercial transaction. So thank you very much today for joining us on this episode of Insights from Exinators Legal. We hope to see you again in another episode where we bring you another interesting discourse on the commercial law. Have a lovely week, and God bless.